This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz, and today, to help kick off the Seahawks 2023 NFL season, I'm joined by my good buddy EJ Snyder of Bootleg Football. You can find him out on x.com at football.ej. Look at me. I've got the lingo down and everything. How are you doing, EJ?
I'm good. We refuse to call it X. We still call it Twitter, but I certainly am agnostic. We'll take either. I'm good. It's an exciting time. Hope springs eternal for all NFL fan bases right now.
Except the Cardinals.
I think they have a different,
just a little farther out in the future.
They have a different kind of hope. They're hoping for something else, but it's building. It's funny because there was this big surge. There's always this big surge of energy, and football is back, right? We get the Hall of Fame game, we get preseason games, and there's this like now 3-ish week burst. You get all these games every week on all kinds of crazy days. It feels, almost like high school, college, whatever. You got games on Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, and then there's whack. And I know the NFL does that, to build anticipation and have this vacuum, and you get hungry for it again. And now the games are going to start counting, and it is one of the most wonderful times of the year.
They have seemed to find a good balance. I haven't quite gotten down the idea of odd number of games within the record. Like if I'm trying to predict a record and I'm thinking, okay, 7 wins, and I have to think about how many losses that would be. I haven't quite gotten that down, but the balance between the preseason now and the regular season, I feel like they've found a good balance.
Seems like they're going to reduce that even further and drop another preseason game and go for more joint practices. Okay. Seems like coaches are enjoying that. More teams are engaging in it. I think they get to do more things that they want to see against live competition outside of the structure of having a clock and having to make it a game, and finish. There's definitely some second halves of fourth quarters where, you're getting guys down the roster reps, but they're just like, look, can we just kick it on first down and make them go for it? We don't want to get, X guy hurt or anybody hurt at that point. And we'll see. It'll continue to evolve, but I'm with you. It feels like a pretty good balance. Guys are getting a lot of chances. And look, we've got other leagues now too, and that really helps. It is a stark difference in competition, but if somebody needs reps, there are multiple places they can go now, hone their skills, catch the NFL's eye again and come back. And lots of guys have done that from all the developmental leagues this year.
Well, and now that the teams have cut down to their 53-man rosters, there's going to be some players that are looking for those developmental opportunities. One of those guys, though, not looking for a developmental opportunity because he made the team. And EJ, I remember you mentioning Jake Bobo and watching him through the preseason. I didn't want to necessarily get my hopes up because for a team that has DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round, has other developmental receivers on the roster, I wasn't sure if Jake Bobo was going to be able to find a spot in this receiver group, but he did it. And he did it through outstanding play in the preseason.
He's a fascinating player. I really like him. He defies definition. People would say, what are you going to do with him? Yeah. Whenever I said I like Jake Bobo, when I saw him at Shrine, or even when I saw him at UCLA before that, people would say, what are you going to do with him? Are you going to make him a move tight end? Are you going to make him a power slot? Are you going to try and make him an X? Are you going to slim him down? Are you going to beef him up? What are you going to do with him? And I, a lot of times, would say nothing, right? I'm not going to do anything with him besides let that guy play football because he's good at that right now. Now, can you find a spot for him in your offense? Yes, you need to be flexible in your definitions because he is not what I would call a traditional player, but we see that on the defensive side of the ball all the time. Seems like we're a little bit more resistant, or the league is a little bit more resistant to that on offense, right? I remember when they tried to classify a guy as an OW, offensive weapon, and the league was like, no, we have pay structures tied to positions. You got to tie him down to one position. So there is some hierarchy there, but he sort of transcends that, much like guys that are defensive backs that, hey, are they a nickel? Are they a safety? Are they a corner? The answer is yes, they're all those things. It's kind of the same with Bobo. Is he a move tight end? Is he a power slot? Can you play him at X? And the answer is Yeah, depending on the play and the lineup and the matchup. And I think that has real value. And I think he's a good football player, and he proved that in the preseason. This is going to sound like name dropping, but it's complete happenstance. I also happen to know his agent. I met her last year, and this year when we were at Shrine, I was like, "Hey, good to see you again. Who do you have? You know, why are you here?" And Jake Bobo is one of her guys, and I was like, "Oh, actually, you know, I'm a Bobo supporter. Like, I like that guy." And then, of course, he ends up here in the Northwest, has a great preseason, earns a spot on the 53, which I don't think was terribly surprising because I knew he was a good football player, and they went ahead and used him in a variety of roles, and he took advantage of those opportunities.
It was just surprising to me because Pete Carroll has always been about speed, and Bobo is a little bit of the antithesis of speed, but he finds ways to get open.
Yeah, I think that really, this is one of those sort of, what's the reverse of Paul Bunyan, right? Is that, you know, he ran you know, historically bad 40 time for anybody that is in the receiver position. And when I saw that, like, people started freaking out about it. I actually didn't even see it.
Yeah.
When it happened. There's a lot of data coming in during those pro days, and everybody was like, "Oh, weren't you a Bobo guy?" And I was like, "What do you mean were?" You're like, I'm a Bobo guy. And they're like, you're not gonna be. And I was like, "Why?" And he ran whatever he ran. He ran a 4.92 or 4.99 or something. He ran something terrible. And I was like, dude, like, you don't believe that, do you? Like, look at his film. He's not 4.9. So I reached out to his agent, and I said, you know, hey, everybody's talking about, I was like, everybody's talking about it. Poured. It was monsooning this spring in Southern California. They had one of the wettest springs and summers they've ever had, and that carried over into me going down for our summer series. Every time I showed up, it was gray and rainy, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? You're supposed to be sunny. That's why I come here. But USC was drenched. USC was terrible, and UCLA was the same way. They had an absolute downpour right before they ran, and they were running outside, and like, the turf was waterlogged. I mean, they were splashing up, footprints as they're going along. And, Molly just texted me back and said, forget it. It was completely soaked. Like, it was a waterlogged 40. Like, and I was like, that makes sense, because at worst, like on a regular day, at worst, that guy's like 4.68.
I'm gonna say 4.65.
Yeah, 4.65, I would say is, and that's on a slow day. I've definitely seen him run more quickly than that. But if he was, and he did, he trained well, he was focused. It had nothing to do with that. It was just, you're running in. There was a clip of Marino that came out today in his return game when Dan Marino was healing up from his Achilles, and we forget that the NFL used to play on baseball fields, like untreated baseball fields, and it had poured, and like the infield was like 4-inch deep mud, and he's doing like a 7-step drop in 4-inch deep mud. And I was like, yeah, see, it just happens.
4.65s, it's slower than Pete tends to like for receivers. Yep. But it's been a fun story. It's been fun watching him play through the preseason, and I'm hoping we get to see more of him on the field. And yeah, unfortunately, part of the reason too, there's been some injuries at the receiver spot, but they might need him here coming up for this game against the Rams. Hopefully they don't need some of their other depth pieces. There were 2 moves that the Seahawks made off the waiver wire that I wanted to get your thoughts on before we get into the meat of the show, EJ. Seahawks pick up Drake Thomas, who was cut by the Las Vegas Raiders. And already, just in the few clips that I've watched from him playing against the Cowboys in the preseason, I don't see how he's a better option than some of the other backups that I've seen in the preseason from Seattle. I'll say that. And I'm a huge Patrick O'Connell fan.
Drake Thomas, one of my guys from this last draft. Love Drake Thomas. Everybody was really focused, especially when he went to Shrine Bowl. But so did his teammate, Isaiah Moore. And Isaiah Moore was the one everybody was focused on, because Isaiah Moore is big, fast, and downhill. Reminded me very much of Denzel Perryman when he was coming out. He is a hole filler. He is a hitter. He will bring the thunder. So everybody was focused on Isaiah Moore. And while I was watching Isaiah Moore to get ready for the Shrine Bowl, Drake Thomas, the other linebacker for North Carolina State, just kept popping for me. He was a captain. He's really quick. He's obviously sawed off. He's not super tall, but he is built like an absolute brick. And he's very, very quick, both mentally and in the short area. Now, his times weren't great, and he definitely tops out pretty quickly. He does not have long speed. So he is good, I would say, pretty much kind of between the numbers a little bit more, but not all the way to the sideline. You certainly don't want him shadowing fast receivers deep downfield. But one of the things that really popped to me was his production versus the quarterback. And again, you're thinking short inside linebacker that doesn't have a ton of speed and definitely not a ton of length. Like, how is he a good rusher or blitzer? And there is a difference. He's an excellent blitzer. He's going to pick up sacks. He had 6 in his second to last college season. He had 8 in his final season. And in this last draft class, he was second only to Ivan Pace, who was another UDFA who went to Minnesota, in total pressures. He had 44, Pace had 51. Now, out of that 44, that was 29 hurries, 7 quarterback hits, and 8 sacks. This is a guy that just has a knack. He understands that. Hold up for a tick, let a hole open, and then use that burst, that anticipation, go get him. And he's tough when he gets there. His arms aren't super long, but he's very, very strong. And he'll bring people down. And that just kept catching my eye, not to mention he's very good on run fills. He's super smart. He's calling the defense for NC State. He's a great leader. And he just looks like a football player. You had that guy in high school that was the middle linebacker and the captain of the team, right? That's Drake Thomas. And he goes out and just produces. Now, he doesn't have ideal measurables. He's a 4.7 guy. We talked about speed and Bobo. Not the tallest, certainly not the longest. And people like measurables, which is why he went undrafted. But again, when you watch him play football, when you watch his tape, when you watch his production, when you watch his teammates rally around him and what he's telling them to do, this is a valuable football player who will carve out a role on a football team. Is he going to be, your starting middle linebacker? Probably not right away. I don't think that's probably what you're wanting in the NFL. You need
Bobby Wagner for now.
You need some special athletes there. Teams are pretty successful, but can he be, a special teams guy right away? Absolutely. He's got a mentality for that. And can he fill in and not make big mistakes, which is very, very important? Make the right fit, make the right fill, not leave open gaps. Yeah, he's going to be excellent at that.
Well, as someone who watched a lot of Cody Barton last year, I feel like he could at least be that. But we're going to have to see. Another guy who I'm interested in hearing about is cornerback Kyu Kelly, who was cut by the Ravens, a Stanford cornerback, drafted in the 5th round. Some of this starts to sound familiar. Also, maybe not the fastest corner, but maybe has the instincts that Pete Carroll likes.
Yeah, Kyu Blu Kelly, he had some very interesting tape. He had some flashy tape at Stanford, and as I was going through his tape, I thought, oh crap, like Thomas Booker, who we interviewed the year before, who was a Stanford defender, ended up getting drafted by the Texans, and we interviewed him on the Bootleg channel and one of our favorite interviews ever. So I reached out to Thomas and I said, hey Thomas, just give me your elevator pitch for Kyu Blu Kelly. Like, what's your favorite thing about him? And he replied, and I quote, playmaking ability, easy. If you throw the ball his way, he's going to make something happen. Just peep that interception he had against Kansas State in the end zone or against USC. And he does have a knack for the big plays. I was going through his tape. He's a bigger dude. He's 6 foot, 191. That's not huge, but for a corner, it's good size. And he is well built. He will throw his shoulder into it on the field. He is a physical corner. Not great speed, but not terrible. He's in the 4.5 range. He doesn't have a ton of burst either. He is not a bursty player, but he is smart, and that keeps him in it. Keeps him in the right position. And again, puts him in positions to make those plays, and he will do it in big moments on the field. Overall, I came away, I thought I was going to be a little bit higher on him throughout the process as I sort of looked at the sum total of his tape. I felt like other guys, for one reason or another, and this is just one of those things that happens when you're doing draft rankings, like I thought he was going to be sort of top 3rd, and I just kept slotting guys in above him. And, because of that, by default, he ended up, opening up probably the second half of my cornerback rankings. I was a bit surprised by that. And you kind of have to go back and go, hey, did I push him down without really meaning to? But I think it showed out through the draft process that that's how a lot of people felt about his game, that he was a good, solid player. He's very smart, but, that there were other people that they wanted to take a chance on first. I'm really interested to see what the Seahawks do with him.
Right.
Because they have a very talented secondary and they have a very deep secondary now. They have a lot of guys at pretty much every position. I would argue it's one of the strongest position rooms on the team, offense or defense. So I'm really interested as to sort of what they think they're going to do with him, what they decide his role is. Now, his most natural spot is outside corner, but I would say unless you have somebody with a limited speed, who is maybe a big tough X, you're maybe not going to love that matchup.
Yeah.
Again, because of the lack of sort of elite burst foot quickness. If he misses the cue to turn and run, he's not gonna run people down from behind. Typically, he can use his size, get in the passing lane, do that sort of thing. We've seen a lot of corners be successful with not top end speed. And again, he's not slow,
right?
But there are definitely times where he gets out athlete. And
definitely a word.
Yep. Yeah, definitely a technical term. Out athlete. But his makeup speed's not incredible, so he's going to have to be really sharp. And we know there's a mental jump coming from college to the pros, that it is more complicated, that everybody's going to throw, lots of things you don't like at you because that's what they're paid to do. If you're not good at double moves, they're going to throw you double moves all day until you figure it out. If you're not good at following crossing routes, they're going to throw you crossing routes until you figure out how to stop it. So he's going to have that learning curve, but I'm most interested in sort of, what do the Seahawks see? Why did they pick him up? Because there's a lot of choices out there. It was a very good cornerback class, and they went for it. So they liked something in that pre-draft process, whether it was the makeup, the physical character, the smarts, physical nature of his play, that playmaking ability, something in there that really sort of tipped their hat, because they did have to go out and get him after he got cut, and they chose to, and they only did that for a couple of guys, and he was one.
Not only did they have to go out and get him, but they had to demote another corner from the team, and to have it be Artie Burns, who we saw play well through the preseason, whether it was in the mock game, whether it was in the preseason games. Artie Burns, a guy you're familiar with, coming from the Bears. And with Devin Witherspoon out, it felt like Artie Burns was maybe the more natural player to have playing the nickel spot. So I had that question too when they made that move. It's like, well, wait, is Witherspoon going to be back in time for week one? Am I not supposed to worry too much about that? I'm going to wait and see.
Yeah, I think it is wait and see. I have no problem with demoting Artie Burns. I was never a huge Artie Burns fan in Pittsburgh or in Chicago. So he did play better last year than he has. But again, if Artie Burns is the reason you're not making a move at cornerback, I think that's maybe misguided. But again, to sort of say that the move that you're going to make at cornerback is Kyu Blu Kelly is really interesting, again, because there's lots of options out there, cutting from 90 to 53 all the way across the league. That is a huge bucket of players.
All right, well, let's get into the meat of the episode for what I wanted to talk about you today. And I didn't want to go game by game through the whole season, but with the season beginning, EJ, I wanted to hear maybe some of your favorite matchups, more intriguing matchups, the best matchups for the Seahawks, however you want to take that kind of quarter by quarter as we go through the season. And whether you want to pick the kickoff game Sunday against the Rams, they also have the Lions. They got to go on the road too. Lions are an intriguing team. They're going to be coming off the opener with the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's going to be the Detroit home opener then. You also have the game against the Panthers with Bryce Young, and then a potential couple of playoff teams with the Seahawks and Giants in October. Out of that whole first quarter, there's quite a few places where you could go with the intrigue.
Yeah, and I think we're going to look at these quarters, or I'm going to look at these quarters maybe a little bit differently than some other folks do. But in this first quarter that you talked about, it's both of the away games. It's Detroit and the Giants, so the Lions and the Giants. And it's sort of a toss-up for me. They're both potentially very interesting games against the Seahawks. Lions hype could not be higher. Like, the Lions have not been more hyped as a football team, maybe in my lifetime. And that's saying something as an NFC North fan. The Lions fans are believing right now because what they saw out of Ben Johnson's offense last year, the improvements on defense, they believe right now. And they should be a very solid test early, again, on the road for the Hawks. But I can't get Brian Daboll and the Giants out of my mind either, because he got every ounce of potential out of that team last year. Although they were terribly shorthanded, they had to take their medicine from a salary cap standpoint. They knew they were going to be underhanded. They knew they were pretty much going to have to stick with Daniel Jones. They did all that, and they made the freaking playoffs. And if you said that before the season, I think a lot of people would have looked at you cross-eyed and said, that's extremely hopeful. Well, it happened. And now, they've had some salary cap relief. They had another good draft under Joe Shane. They've filled more talent in the building. They, went out selectively in the free agent market. They kept their talent. It's going to be a very, very tough team. It's a super well coached team, and it's going to be a big challenge, again, on the road early for a Hawks team that is planning on contending itself. And here are two powers in the NFC early, both on the road. Let's see how you hold up. So I would kind of flip a coin between those two and say both of those are potential early season games. They could be real sort of litmus tests as we get into it, especially the Giants one. Week 2 can still be a little bit wonky. Everybody's figuring things out, especially for teams that rest starters in the preseason. But by week 4 on the road, going against a team that should be very solid this year, how do you look?
And by week 4, you're going to have an idea of whether or not this Seahawks defensive line really improved, because you would have had that Sean McVay is going to want to run against the Seahawks team to protect Matt Stafford. That the Lions are going to want to use Jahmyr Gibbs straight out of the gate and run the ball. Panthers, they did it to Seattle last year. Are they going to be able to do it again? And then the Giants, who actually, Saquon was the one star running back they seem to be able to shut down for one magical week out of the season. Can they do it 2 straight years in a row?
It's going to be, all those are tough challenges. And there's there are no easy weeks in the NFL. There are weeks where players will tell you, candidly, we're looking past that a little bit, but every team in the NFL is stacked with the guys that were, their conference award winner, right? And, we're in the Heisman running, and, we're up for the Butkus Award. And I mean, it's killers every week. And, all those games are going to be really interesting. But as you mentioned, a lot of those teams are going to put pressure on Seattle on the ground. And again, just like we talked about with Kyu Blu Kelly, if there's something you're not good at, opposing teams are just going to push that button until it wears out, or you stop it. That's the gig.
And it'll set it up for the rest of the season until other teams get stopped. They get a bye week, so after those 4 weeks, they'll be able to assess how those 4 weeks went, and then they go into a stretch against the Bengals on the road. Then they're back at home against the Cardinals. I'm guessing you won't pick that one. They have the Browns at home, the throwback uniform game, which will be real fun, and then they go on the road against the Ravens.
For me, it's the Ravens. I think a lot of people will say Cincinnati. Yeah. Again, power team in the AFC, absolutely, but I believe that Baltimore is going to be a much improved team. It's always been that the defense in Baltimore was very good. It continues to be quite good, very good. And they finally moved on from Greg Roman to Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator. And I am extremely excited. Again, this is health dependent on Lamar, as it is with most starting quarterbacks in the NFL. But I really believe this is going to be a team that is going to be much more difficult to defend, from an offensive standpoint than it has been. This game is on the road. It's in November. It's all the way across the country. And I think Baltimore is a somewhat sneaky power team, and that's because they are always good. Their coaching is so solid. Harbaugh does not allow them to be very far below 500, no matter if their roster is completely devastated by injury, and it seems like it has been. Finally moved on from his good friend Greg Roman, and now we might see a much more balanced team. And even without that balance, this team has been in it to week 9 to week 10. And then usually injuries stack up, and then, the backups and the combination of that offense can't get them over the hump, and people kind of forget about them. But in the early part of the season, it's always, oh man, Baltimore's 7-3, Baltimore's, 8-1, Baltimore's like, and then they fall off. I don't know that they fall off this year, and it's going to be a very strong test for the Hawks traveling all the way across the country and going against this new look Ravens offense, which should be clicking by then. And I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, Zay Flowers, one of those guys that I enjoyed during the draft process, and was maybe one of the receivers I was thinking about until JSN ended up in Seattle. Between the Ravens and Bengals, say Lamar's able to put together a completely healthy season, Joe Burrow ends up being fine with his injury that he's been dealing with in the preseason. Who do you like between those two teams then?
That is going to be an absolute alley fight. It always is. That entire division, AFC North, is always there. Again, speaking of no easy games, there are no easy conference games.
Browns could be tough this year.
Browns are going to be tough. And, Pittsburgh, forget about it. Like, Pittsburgh is, again, perennially tough. But I, again, think that they're loaded or reloaded in a way. Pickett's looked really good in the preseason. It looks like he learned a lot of lessons from his, I would say, extended playing time last year. He's one of the rookies that got a lot more snaps than many of the others. And they look fired up too. So it's like when you're trying, I never bet on that division, because you just don't know. Everybody is going to punch each other in the mouth every week. And when I start looking at predictions or roster predictions for that division, I just sort of guarantee that they're all going to split, that everybody's going to beat everybody once and lose to everybody once. I very rarely look at that division and go, oh, that team's going to get dominated. Like the NFC West, I'm looking at the Cardinals this year. Cardinals, yes, I'm looking at you. And the Rams, I think will be lucky to split. The Cardinals, I'm not thinking they're gonna.
Well, in this next stretch of 4, and maybe we can lump in 5 games, because on that 5th game, the Seahawks play the Niners again. And I don't know. I'll leave it to you if you want to take a different matchup other than the Niners in this 4 and then push them out to the next one. Maybe you don't want to talk about the Niners at all. Maybe you want to talk about the Commanders, because EJ, I think the plan is we do a meetup at the Commanders game on November 12th. So that's a very intriguing matchup as far as I'm concerned. They face the Rams again on the road in LA, and then it is the 49ers Seahawks on Thanksgiving in Seattle before Seattle goes on the road against the Cowboys. And then, like I said, then it's Niners again.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be focused on the Niners. Mm-hmm. It's the rivalry. I'm not going to focus on the Niners. I was going to focus on Washington. We are going to go to that game. We're going to get a block of tickets and have a good time. So if you want to come out and meet Brandon and I believe Brett will be up for that one as well. So that's going to be a really good time. And I really like the Commanders' chances this year, but I'm not going to pick the Commanders game. I'm going to go Dallas on the road, Thursday Night Football. All eyes on this game. It's the only game going on Thursday night, and Dallas, perennial NFC power. Now, are they going to win the Super Bowl? Probably not. They've had a little bit of a struggle later off in the playoffs, but in terms of regular season record, especially lately, it's a very strong team. They've played extremely well. They have stars on both sides of the ball. They are an attacking team. Again, if Dak is healthy and Mike is going full speed, good luck. Like, that is a strong, strong football team. And again, late in the season, again, this is one of the games that all the players in the league get to watch, because it's like Monday Night Football. It's the only one going. We'll be live streaming it on Bootleg. I'm circling that one. It's again, 2 teams that want to be on top of the NFC, getting about 3/4 of the way through the season, sort of, gut check. We're going to throw the car on the dyno and see how many horsepower it actually makes in real competition. Seahawks have to go on the road and prove it. They have to go down to, AT&T and take one. And good teams that expect to make noise in the playoffs, have to do that.
It's going to be a fun matchup. I'm curious, since you did pick the Cowboys, what did you make of the Trey Lance trade from the Niners to Dallas?
Not much. I think it's a lottery ticket. it very much is Trey Lance needed to move on. That situation's really unfortunate. He needed a lot of reps. He didn't get them because of injury. The 49ers got bailed out by getting a Mr. Irrelevant who played the lights out. He played really, really good football, and that made it really untenable to say, okay, we're going to sit that guy and now take our lumps, a year and a half or 2 years later for this developmental guy that needs development that we put all these resources into. It just became untenable. I don't really think that's Trey Lance's fault. He certainly hadn't played great, and he doesn't have to. He's out of the spotlight now. He's out of what was a bad situation for him after about the first year and a half. He gets to sit behind Dak, see how he does it. He's a similar quarterback in terms of his physical skill, and he's really going to get to sit with Dak in the meeting rooms. Cooper Rush too, who is a very smart leader on the field. We've seen him lead the Cowboys through as a backup quarterback, and that may be Trey Lance's lot in the NFL life. And it's not a bad one. If you can get work as an NFL backup quarterback, we've seen guys have 7, 8, 10, 12, 14-year careers doing that. Good work if you can get it. If he can learn how to do either, be a tenable starter from Dak or be a valuable backup from Cooper Rush, and do it without the sort of bright spotlight and all those draft picks hanging over his head, good for him. He seems like a good young guy. He definitely has some talent. He definitely has a long way to go. He is one of those guys that, had he not been picked up, I think could have gone to one of the developmental leagues and really thrived. He needs those downs. He needs those snaps. He came into the league tremendously short on those. And it's all he needed, and he just couldn't get him through a combination of, injury and then poor play, and just circumstance, really. And that's all he needed, and he just couldn't get him. So we'll see how many he gets in Dallas and how quickly he learns those lessons.
Yeah, really tough spot for him to be in, with the Niners being in that contending position. And
when you just can't wait.
You can't wait. Well, speaking of the Niners, that is who they have next after that Thursday night football matchup with the Cowboys. And then it is into the final quarter of the season. Eagles, Seahawks. That's going to be in Seattle. Seahawks go on the road against the Titans. Steelers and Seahawks, that's back at home to close out the 2023 calendar year. And then closing it against the Cardinals, which I would assume we don't need to go there.
We don't need to go there. The Seahawks do, but we don't. A little bit of history with Tennessee would have made that fun. I think a lot of people are looking at Philadelphia. I would expect Philadelphia to beat this team. Now, could the Seahawks,
You don't need to make decisions on wins and losses at this point of the season.
No.
I'm only asking for your intrigue, EJ.
Right. I have a ton of intrigue, but a little bit less in that game because Philadelphia is, again, the contender in the NFC and has done nothing to dissuade me from that. In fact, they've done some things to strengthen that. So that one is a little bit more, I think I know where it's going. A little bit of interesting history with Tennessee. I was at the Tennessee game a couple of years ago.
Don't need to talk about that either.
Nope, we don't need to talk about that. But again, a little bit of payback possible there. I'm actually going to go with Pittsburgh. Again, Pittsburgh has to travel for this one. It is very late in the season, but not the last week of the season. So I don't think we'll see people resting starters 2 weeks out. And Pittsburgh is going to be, again, we talked about the AFC North already, a very powerful team, a super well-coached team. Mike Tomlin has my ultimate respect. Just wills his team over 500 every year. And this year has a lot of young players that I think are going to contribute really early and make life really difficult for opposing offenses and defenses. And if they stay healthy, that combination could be powering them to the top of even whatever a division where everybody is saying, oh no, it's going to be Cincinnati for sure. And it may well be. I'm saying, Baltimore could be sneaky. And that too could be true, but I would be very surprised if outside of a rash of injuries, and I'm not talking about a single one or two, that Pittsburgh wasn't right there at the end of the year as well. They're a very competent football team, both in talent and coaching. They play extremely hard, and it's going to be a real test for the Seahawks. And if the Seahawks can polish off the Steelers late in the season at their house, at the Seahawks house, that's going to be a very good indicator. That is going to be a nice roll to head, presumably towards the playoffs. Like, hey, Tomlin came to town and we sent him home with a loss. that would be a feather in the Seahawks cap. Other teams will take note as well, because the book is out there on Pittsburgh, one of the most stable organizations out there, both in terms of front office, coaching, I'll say scheme. If they can, spank the Steelers and send them home with a loss, that's going to be a very good thing rolling into the playoffs for the Seahawks.
I like it. I like that you picked all games that the Seahawks are expected to win. And that's according to EJ Snyder of Bootleg Football. They will beat the Giants. That game's circled on the calendar. They're going to beat the Ravens as they go on the road. They'll beat the Washington Commanders because we'll be there at that game. They will beat the Cowboys on the road. Of course, they'll beat the 49ers twice because I'm throwing that in there, and then capping it off with a win over the Steelers at home to close out the 2023 calendar year.
Well, if that happens, you're going to be celebrating. I'm going to be wishing I bet all those games. So I probably think it might not happen that way, because I very rarely end up going, oh, I should have bet those games. No. I end up going, oh, I'm really glad I didn't bet those games. So, but it's going to be a fascinating season. It's a really good slate. As a Seahawks fan, there's a ton of good football on this slate, and
and it's hard to really pick. When you break it out by quarters. Like you're saying, there in each quarter, there were two games that were really tough to pick between.
Yeah, there was no like, oh, there's only one game I can pick in this quarter. And in previous seasons, there were quarters like that where it was like, hey, look, it's the Niners game, period. Like, that's the only game in this quarter that really holds a lot of weight. This is, and we all know that schedules look very different at the beginning of the year, midway through the year, and the end of the year, because right now we're going off last year's results and what's happened since then. But we're guessing by midway, you've got a pretty good idea of who's heating up. And then there are those teams that get hot at the end and go on a 6 or 8 game run to finish out the season. So it's an ever shifting sands, but as we sit and look at it today, right before the season kicks off, this is a fascinating slate of games, a lot of good games coming to Seattle, a lot of interesting games on the road. This schedule does not lack for excitement, intrigue, talent, any of that. It's a very solid, fun schedule.
A lot of content coming up on Bootleg Football too for EJ. For folks that haven't checked out the channel, they should do better and actually check it out. But what is kind of your general release schedule coming up here for this 2023 football season?
Yeah, we're very much hoping to have an early reaction pod this year. We are going to cut it kind of live. It won't be live with an audience, but it will be unedited, so we can get it out really quickly, basically recording a live stream like this, and then having it up hopefully on Mondays during the season. So that'll be a little bit earlier. We will have Thursday night live streams again, where we are watching the games. That'll be live on the Bootleg YouTube channel as well. And then we're hoping to add a third piece of content every week, which is our edited piece, which we can have some diagrams and talk about some things that are interesting schematically or thematically going on throughout the league, that really is sort of catching our eye, trends, teams or players that are making moves that we want to let bootleg listeners and viewers know about. That's one of the things that really drives us in this business is digging in a little bit and going, what's really happening here? Is this a shift? Is it going to last? So hopefully 3 pieces of content per week this year. Of course, we've got our partnership with Underdog going, so we'll be putting out odds and pick'ems for all the games. Really looking forward to it. It's going to be super busy, a little travel as well. We'll be releasing that schedule as quickly as we can. I know Brett's already released a bunch of his, and should be a whirlwind. It's going to be, playoffs before you know it.
Well, keep an eye out in your email if you're a member of our flock at getintheflock.com, because we'll have tickets there for the game against the Commanders on November 12th. Follow EJ at Football EJ out online, on Twitter, on the platform formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, the artist formerly known as Twitter.
And be sure and subscribe to their YouTube channel, Bootleg Football. Lots of great stuff coming up. And EJ, I want to thank you again for coming on. It's always a good time.
Hey, every time you invite me back, I have a good time. And I just think, he's never going to do that again.
It will happen again, sir. And I think with that, there's only one thing left to say. Go Hawks.